Welcome to the top of Denk Mountain. We're here in Carlsbad, California. We're activating this peak today. Let's show you how we got up here.
So let's look at the map. Look at that trail structure. I mean, it's just a mess up there. So the locals telling me the deal is straight trails tend to be for hikers. Switchbacks tend to be for the mountain bikers. And the mountain bikers are going to outnumber you up there probably 2 to 1. So don't be surprised and keep an eye out for them. So today we're hiking up off of the road called SC-368. Gosh, I'm never good at this. Salvia. And we're going up the most direct route to the top, which is the Mule Deer Trail. It's 0.63 miles up with only 556 feet of elevation gain. So it's not that hard at all. It's actually a pretty mild trail. So we're going to start down here on the street, and there's a service road that heads on up the hill. And pretty much you're going to go up this, and at the top, you're going to hang a right-hand turn. You'll know you're going the right way because pretty soon you're going to run across some pretty sizable boulders in the walkway. And I think that's probably primarily there to keep vehicles out of here. The other way, I believe, is a service road up to a couple of water tanks. You're going to come to this signpost, and you're going to want to hang a left. Now, originally, I hung a right here and got lost till the locals found me and straightened me out. This is the Mule Deer Trail, and basically, it's just a really nice double-wide trail that's going to go all the way up to the summit, where it's going to split off at the top, and you're going to hang a right up there. By now, you're going to start seeing the top, and there's a couple of coverings up there, and you've made it to the top.
All right, so we're on top of Denk Mountain. So let's talk about what we're doing today. We're doing something kind of unique. This is going to be an evening, nighttime activation. And I always like to do something different. I've been up on this summit probably 3 or 4 times activating it. And today I came up with a specific mission. What I want to do is I'm going to look for a band that's just really good for night activations, because I like to hike in the dark, and it's really hard to find a good band that you can do activations on. So today we came up with the intent of we're going to do a VHF activation. We're going to talk on FM. With any luck, we're going to get really up into the LA area. We know we can get down in the San Diego area, but we're going to, the biggie today is we're going to be activating 80 meters, and with luck, we'll make some contacts on 80 meters. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a Ventenna vertical with a loading coil on it, and that's how we're going to set that up. So let's look at the elevation profile for Denk Peak. You know what? It's a really good site for VHF because it's mainly a path over ocean up into the LA area. Now, when I try to shoot up into the LA, San Fernando Valley area, I've got a couple of areas of concern. I've got the mountains up by San Onofre that are going to block me. And then I've also got the mountains, the Hollywood Hills up there that are going to block me getting into the San Fernando Valley. So we'll see how that works out. I know we got a couple of hams that are said to listen for me, and we'll see if we can make the connection. San Diego's no problem. It's all downhill, clear sailing. Inland Empire ain't going to happen. It's a wall of mountains. So let's look at the area map. Denk Peak is situated kind of in the San Diego North County, the coastal area. It's an ideal area to be right up on the ocean front, so we get some good distance with VHF. Beautiful views up here. If you're going to come up here, take some extra time just to sit down on one of the benches and look at the view. Don't get too caught up in your radio. You'll want to take a peek. So with that being said, let's go ahead, and what we're going to do on VHF today, we're going to do 146.58 FM, maybe 146.52, and let the simplex guys yell at us. And then we're going to move over to 144.2 upper sideband and see if we can contact. There's a very active group of hams up in the LA area that use that sideband frequency. We'll see if we can reach them. If you're going to get into sideband, let me just help you out here a bit. If you're going to get into sideband activations, you really need a beam, and I'll tell you why. A lot of them are horizontally polarized. Keep in mind that when you're horizontal and they're vertical, that's 20 dB of signal loss, and that's just a no-go. So, but here's the deal. Some of them are horizontal and some are vertical. The nice thing about having a handheld beam is I can switch it up depending on their polarization. Let's get the beam set up, let's get going, and let's get the VHF activation going. CQ, 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 CQ 2 meters for summits on the air. Kilo Golf 6 Lima, India, KG6LI, activating summit SC-368 in Carlsbad, California, and listening. Thought I had a station in there real weak. Go for KG6LI. CQ, CQ, CQ 2 meters for summits on the air. Kilo Golf 6 Lima, India, KG6LI, calling CQ and listening. Well, let me swing it around this way. I got November 3.
November 3, X-ray, uniform, Lima. November 3, X-ray, uniform, Lima. How copy?
Chris, I got you now that I swung it around. You're 5'6" up here on Denk Peak.
KG6LI, this is W6 Alpha, Alpha Juliet, W6AAJ. Never done this before, so you have to walk me through it.
No problem, W6AAJ. Well, that was a bit of a disappointment. We tried all of our normal VHF frequencies, and we only got 2 contacts. That's okay. Boy, it'd be terrible if I had to come hike this beautiful peak again. Look at the sunset. So we're moving on to HF, and HF is kind of specifically why we came up here. So let's talk a little bit. First, let's do this. Let's look at the solar weather right now. Okay, so we're still in the low 70s on the solar flux index, but we settled down a little bit. K of 1, I think the AS7, and the maximum usable frequency pumped up to earlier today, 18 megahertz. So it's not that now, but it's better. So let's do this. I've gotten about 2 or 3 emails from people, and they say, hey, I know those numbers you post, but I have no idea what they're at. So let's just break this down kind of slowly. And the first thing we're going to look at, let's look at solar flux index and what that is. Real quick, let's look at that.
Okay, guys, so I'm going to keep this real basic. We're just going to have a general discussion about solar flux index. Now, for you advanced hams that know all about this, you probably can jump forward to the activation. For the advanced hams that look at this, I'd appreciate if you leave some comments if you've had a different experience or whatever, so that people looking at this video kind of get a rounded experience. Trust me, I don't throw myself on the floor and I don't hold my breath, so you can take whatever shots you want. So let's just come to this. This Earth is always being exposed to a certain amount of energy being released by the sun. And these charged particles typically come in the form of UV radiation and X-rays. And what happens is this amount varies on the 11-year solar cycle. Now, the first thing is SFI is basically, we monitor it by monitoring an electromagnetic signal from the sun at 2.5 gigahertz or 10.7 centimeters. That's the best methodology we have for monitoring it. The SFI and sunspot number have a real strong correlation because UV radiation tends to emanate from basically sunspot areas. The SFI can vary widely. Like for today's activation, I think we had a SFI in the low 70s, but it can be as low as in the mid 60s. But it can skyrocket pretty quickly at a solar peak up into the 200s. And the higher the SFI, the more UV radiation, X-ray radiation that's being released as ionizing our atmosphere. It's better for us. It's better for DX. It's better for contacts. Now, as this ionization takes place, a number of daytime layers appear above the Earth. And there's only 2 we have to worry about. Maybe a third. Let's talk about them. The first one we bump into is called the D layer. And the D layer is the closest layer to the Earth, but it's not very dense. In fact, it's not dense enough even to refract a signal back to Earth. So it tends to take on the personality as a signal absorber. And what I mean by that, you've all probably been in your car driving late at night and gone through the AM band, and you can hear stations all over the United States. But for some reason during the day, you're only picking up the local stations. Well, that's the D layer at work. It tends to absorb signals in the lower portion of the amateur radio or the spectrum. So here, basically, if you're on 160, 80, 40, and 60, and to a certain degree 30, the daytime signals just don't occur. 80 meters converts over to a local, basically less than 100 miles. There's really no skip to be heard because the signals are being absorbed. E layer is not essential or that important in the HF spectrum, but it becomes really important when you start talking E layer skips, sporadic E, 10 meters, 6 meters. Then it becomes more important. The F1 layer plays a lesser role. The F2 layer is actually the real important layer, and that's where most of our long distance skip occurs, is the F2 layer. Now, these are the layers that are typically present during the daytime hours, but as we convert to nighttime, a couple things tend to happen. We lose the D layer. There's not enough ionizing energy coming from the sun, so that layer tends to dissipate. And that's tonight, while we activate 80 meters, this is what allows us to talk further than 2 blocks away, is the fact that we now have no D layer, and 80 meters can now take a normal path of refraction off the F layer. So that's why we tend to hear more long distance communications in the 160 and the 80 meter, and even 40 meters will go long at night. And it's all because we lose this D layer. Again, the E layer plays more of an essential role for VHF communications, 10 meters, 6 meters, thereabouts. For common daylight on 80 meters, you're really not going to notice much difference there, okay? Now, where we can find these numbers is pretty simple. You can go to the QRZ page, and they're constantly posting the solar weather, and right up in the corner, you'll see SFI today, 73. That's low. That's not good. And if you notice right next to it, we have a sunspot number of 12. Now, that's low. And let me tell you why. It's really weird how they count sunspots. So for every cluster of sunspots on the face of the sun, they get 10 points. And then for every sunspot within that cluster, they get an additional point. So when I see a sunspot number of 12, it tells me we've got one cluster with 2 spots. Now, I may be wrong on that, but that's pretty low. Now, considering we're coming off a protracted time of basically no sunspots on the face of the sun, this is actually pretty exciting, and within itself, that's kind of pathetic. Okay, so what does this mean for us? Okay, so this is talking about QRP operations as a SOTA activator, and this is where it becomes a little bit different. You'll have Ham say, one day I went out and the solar flux index was only a 70, and I talked to France. Here's the difference. When you're activating, you become the quasi-net control operator. And what I mean by that is when you come up in the air in an activation, a whole swarm of amateur radio operators are going to come there and listen for you and try to get your contact. Now, one or two things happen when they can't hear you. One is they can't hear you and they leave and you lose that contact, and that's a bummer. Or the second and less enjoyable is that this group tends to take on a life of their own, and basically you get this pile up that's just out of control because they can't hear you. They're getting no directions from you. So this has no basis in science, but this is kind of over the years. I've always logged in what the SFI was in my logging program, and this is kind of my experience, and your experience may be different. So kind of in the range of 65 to 72. When I wake up in the morning and I see those levels and I'm going to be doing a SOTA activation, my initial thoughts are A, cancel altogether, or B, do I have a VHF option on that peak if everything else goes south on me? Because you're talking some fringy numbers there. So CW may produce some contacts, but you're going to have some pretty deep fading, and that's a bummer because people can't hear you, and all of a sudden your pilot takes off on you. Okay, when I get that low on my QRP rig, sideband to me, it's out. I just can't make the contacts. Now, you may have had a different experience. QRO stations may have a different experience. I'm talking about 5-watt sideband FT817ND. Doesn't happen. Now, as that number creeps up, we're getting to the low 70s and 80s. There is some improvement. We start to see improving conditions initially around CW, but you're still going to have some fading. But it's not as deep as when it gets down in the low 70s. They still can hear you, typically. You may start hearing some DX. Now, typically as an activator, I start hearing New Zealand and France when we get up into the 80s, and that I really enjoy. Sideband potential, better, but still not great. When I get on sideband, if I'm carrying low numbers like that, no one's hearing me. Now, when we get above 81 and up to whatever level it is, again, it could go as high as 200. Both CW and sideband are alive. They're going to produce some good results for you. There's less fading, and DX is much improved. But you keep in mind, as your SFI starts getting higher and higher and higher, it's great. But with the more production of sunspots, we run a higher risk of solar flare activity. And a solar flare will take you out if it's a significant one. An X-class solar flare will typically kill communications about 8 minutes after it occurs. And that's basically the time it takes, the speed of light for the X-rays to reach us, and it disrupts our atmosphere. The good thing is that disruption tends to diminish the higher up in frequency you are. So if you're down in 40 meter land or 80 meter land, the disruption seems to be a little bit more than, say, if you were at 10 meters. The other thing is it tends to self-correct after about an hour. Now that's okay, but just keep in mind there's probably a corneal mass ejection, a bunch of charged particles or debris headed for Earth, and that's going to be the second hit. But we're not going to talk about that right now. So basically, when you're activating, when I get up in the morning, I look at the SFI. It's not the only indicator of success. It's one of many. So get into the habit of start looking at that number and then correlate it to how it's working on your radio. And you'll see as that number climbs, things get better.
Okay, so the plan today is we're doing 80 meters. Now, I would love to be able to hike up here with a 60-foot mast or a 40-foot mast and put 160 feet of wire out. That ain't happening. So we're back up here again with the Ventana vertical, and we're going to be using the Ventana with the 80-meter adapter kit, which makes it roughly about 11 feet tall. And it introduces a loading coil, and anytime you introduce a loading coil that's kind of on the high Q side, my bandwidth really reduces down. So we're going to have to be careful about the SWR figuring that out. What we're going to do actually though is we're going to start at 40 meters. So let's look at what in past activations has happened. Now 40 meters in the evening, I have real trouble kind of getting out of Colorado. I get occasionally a contact into the Ohio River Valley, but not very often. So I'm kind of hoping I've still got some West Coast stations out there. 30 meters is kind of in between. Okay, we'll see what that does today. And hopefully we'll be able to get up into like Oregon, Northern California. 80 meters I've never activated before, so I have nothing to tell you about it. If you read the books about it, I'll tell you it's about a 500 mile circumference. That's what it's about good for. That would put us into kind of central Utah. It'd get us into Vegas. We'll just have to see what shows up. But basically what I'm searching for is a band that's kind of reliable, that if I'm going out on an evening hike I can use, and one that's kind of resistant to a lot of changes with the solar minimum and changes in the flux. So let's set up for 40 meters and we'll get that activation going. Okay, so we're done. We're packed up. We're ready to go. We're going to be heading off the hill here momentarily. Let's look at the. Sorry about the lighting. It is what it is. Let's look at the after action report and see how things turned out up here.
Okay, let's take a look at this hike. This was a real simple hike. It's a basically 1.34 miles both in and out with only 500 feet of elevation gain. It's a real mild hike. Now, the key is when you look at the map, switchbacks tend to be for the mountain bikers. The straight trails tend to be for the hikers. You watch out for them because those crisscross, and this is like mountain bike mecca for San Diego County, so be careful. The activation area is really large. It's huge, in fact, but it's really crowded, and there's a lot of bikers up there, so be real careful about where you deploy guy lines or ground radials or set up, because you'll have to deal with that. Cell service, not an issue. We're surrounded by cities, so it's good. APRS, we started picking up near the summit by Digipeter and Fallbrook, which is in far north San Diego County. The VHF profile should have been good into LA, but that sure didn't prove itself, so I'm not sure what's going on there. The noise sources are non-existent. The trails are nice and wide, well used, and some of them are even service roads over to the top. And difficulty is it's an easy hike. Just watch out for the mountain bikers, okay? Again, the equipment we use, the ASU FT817ND on both HF and VHF. The antenna we used up here is the Ventenna HFP with an 80 meter coil. So here's the deal with 80 meters. Just come to the realization, if you're going to use 80 meters on a summit, you're using some sort of compromised antenna, period, okay? I mean, the wire antennas that are available for 80 meters are around 160 feet long, and I don't know of a summit where I could have deployed that. If I set 160 feet of wire up on this peak, most of it would be in the spokes of the mountain bikers, so it's no bueno. So 80 meters is going to be a compromise no matter how you look at it. Also realize, before you think 80 meters might be a good thing, in summer it just goes to heck because it's very prone to lightning strikes, static. So if you've got lightning storms across the central part of the country or that, you're just going to get these lightning crashes. So, that's the reality of it. The VHF antenna we used today was the Aero 146-3 handheld Yagi, and it did good. I'm sure it did good. No one hurt us, though. Didn't use a tuner. RG8X is what we used today. And on 80 meters, that has about 0.157 dB loss at 3.5 megahertz. Basically, the 80 meter coil, when you add it to the HFP, also has a tendency to really narrow you, because it's high Q, it really narrows your bandwidth, so you're always having to retune. That's another thing. Okay, so how'd we do? 13 contacts, okay. Bands used was 40, 60, 80, and 2. I think earlier I was talking about 30 meters. I don't know what I was talking about. Maybe I was dehydrated, or I don't know. But we never did 30. We did 60. 11 contacts on HF, 2 on VHF. We used CW, FM, and sideband. Our great long shot VHF was 13 miles down the road in the Miramar area. Not sure what happened with the VHF activation. Typically, I mean, if I'm on the population side of the mountains, it's rare for me not to pick up at least 4, if not more. Picked up 2, so either one of two things were going on. I overestimated our height above average terrain and thought that they could hear me up in LA, and they didn't, or I hit them at a bad time. When I set up and activated, it was about dinner time, so I'm not sure if we just didn't have people not listening for me or what the deal there. We'll figure it out.
Okay, so we accomplished some of our goals. We made our 80 meter contacts. I was thrilled about that. Did okay on 40. 2 meters for some reason. I think it caught everybody at dinner time or something, because it was dead, man. It was absolutely dead. I think 2 or 3 contacts. Insane. This past week, the Soda family had a loss, and it's kind of sad. It's a guy. It's a W8 BUD back in Michigan. He was a avid chaser. In fact, I looked him up, and I had a whole bunch of 17 meter contacts with him. We lost him this past week. Silent key, and we'll sure miss him. R.I.P. Bud. You take care, man. And I sure hope the angels descend and take care of your family in your absence. And it's just sad. It's sad when you lose people.